Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Quickly, do want to talk a little college football transfer portal, because I'll tell you this, the portal opened on Monday, and the portal is humming. And more specific than the portal humming is the fact that it is worth noting that this was the first weekend that, the portal opened Monday. So this was the first weekend that players could visit. This was kind of the first big wave of commitments. And I think we saw some very interesting things that I think are going to help shape and define the 2024 season happening this weekend via the portal. So I want to get into it. I want to break it down. I want to talk about some of the big portal moving and shaking. But let me start by, if you're a college football fan, stating the obvious. There was no bigger portal winner this weekend than the Oregon Ducks. And frankly, I don't even think it was that close. So Oregon, listen, I'll say this. Dan Lanning is a dog, okay? Dan Lanning is I think he's the future of college football. And I've said this many, many, many times on this show. But this is a guy that I think he gets the landscape better than everybody, right? Because you have the older coaches that they don't really like NIL. They don't really like the portal. Dan Lanning's 35, 36, and he's just look, this is the world. And I'm going to be in this world for the next 20 to 30 years, so I might as well get used to it. And I've said this on this show before, but I talk to people who are around that program, and they're like, look, when we had Mario Cristobal, we thought he was a monster in recruiting, and he is. But Dan Lanning is a whole nother level. And Dan Lanning has a plan for the 2024 kids and the 25 kids and the 26 recruiting class, which is now just sophomores. And he has plans for the portal and grad transfers and undergrad. And I bring it up because this school is working quick, and it is clear that whether you like it or not, in this portal era where everybody is trying to just gather information and be prepared, that Dan Lanning and Oregon were prepared going into this portal cycle. First off, they got the single biggest commitment of the portal so far, at least as I'm recording here at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma transfer, decides to go to Oregon. So Oregon replaces a Heisman Trophy finalist in Bo Nix with one of the best quarterbacks in college football, Dylan Gabriel. This year, 3,900 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This guy was phenomenal, okay? And a couple things here. One, I've seen a lot of this, and let's just clarify. Anyone who sits there and, by the way, 3,700 yards, give or take, forgive the 200-yard difference, okay? But a couple things. One, I saw a little bit of the, how can you leave Oklahoma? He wasn't going to be the starter. It was clear that they want to let Jackson Arnold, the 5-star who sat behind him this year, they want to give him the reins. That's okay. That's Oklahoma's prerogative, whatever, but it's his prerogative to look around. But you look at who he is. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football. He's not perfect, because if he was, he'd already be in the pros. But as far as a really, really, really good college quarterback, he is on the very short list of very talented players. Two, I think it's a near perfect fit for him because they're going to have so much talent around him. And I'm not going to sit here and pick apart the Oklahoma or the Oregon depth chart right now, but Dan Lanning, as I said, is a monster in recruiting, and they are going to have a team with talent at the skill positions, with a great offensive line. A lot of their best offensive linemen are coming back. A lot of their best defensive players are coming back. And oh, by the way, they had a huge name in the portal on campus this weekend. So just a great, great, great recruiting win for Oregon and Dan Lanning. And they are set at the quarterback position for 2024. What's wild about Oregon, there are 2 other notes from the portal on them. And one is that this is incredible. They might not be done in the portal this offseason at quarterback. So the report is, I think it was Chad Simmons, I want to say, from On3. If it was somebody else that reported this, I apologize. I think it was Chad Simmons, great recruiting writer. He reported that Dante Moore, who was UCLA's starting quarterback for most of this year, former 5-star, only number 2 recruit in the 2023 class at the quarterback spot, behind only Arch Manning. He announced he's transferring from UCLA, and that he might end up committing to Oregon too. Now, a lot of people would sit there and say, why would you go to Oregon you just told me, Torres, that they just signed a starting quarterback for next year. Well, one thing about Dante Moore, he has said repeatedly throughout this process that he wants to go to a place where it's not about being a starter, it's about being developed properly. And so I think from his perspective, he's sitting there saying, well, look, they may already have their starter. I can sit back for a year. I can learn. I can take it all in, and I can be ready to be the dude in 2025. So we'll see. Michigan is hotly after Dante Moore, Florida State, Miami. There's others that are certainly interested. But if Oregon can stack that quarterback room with a fifth-year starter this year, and then in 2025 have a third-year guy, a former five-star who has started big-time college football games ready to go, you can't ask for much more than that if you're an Oregon fan. So credit Dan Lanning. He's got it rolling. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing about Oregon. They had the best player in the portal on campus this weekend. So they get a commitment from what I believe to be the best quarterback in the portal. One of the 2, 3, 4 best quarterbacks may come in as a backup, but also Walter Nolan, who was the number 2 overall player in the high school class of 2022, behind only Travis Hunter. Played the last 2 years at Texas A&M. His first visit this weekend, it was to Eugene, Oregon, and visit the Oregon Ducks. And so this is a defensive lineman, kind of more of a tackle than an edge guy, but big, physical, 8.5 TFLs this year, 4 sacks. I thought he played really well. I thought he stood out when I watched A&M every week. And so he is visiting Oregon. Now he is in he's a hot property. He's from Tennessee. I think Tennessee's in the mix, Georgia, Texas, maybe a LSU, somebody like that. But I just bring it up, Alabama maybe potentially as well. But I just bring it up because to have the number 1 quarterback on campus and the number 1 defensive lineman on campus, that is a huge, huge, huge weekend. And what I would say about portal recruiting, it's important to note, like, kids are not taking visits if they are not seriously considering your school. So big weekend for Oregon. As I record, he has not committed yet. Maybe that will change. My guess is that he is the type of kid that is going to take his time. So we will see. But busy weekend at Oregon. Really quickly, I just mentioned Walter Nolan, a former 5-star defensive lineman from A&M. Thought it was worth noting a few things on A&M. One, there was a lot of negativity about A&M this weekend because they had a bunch of players at the portal. It is worth noting, though, they did get a very nice commitment on what would have been Sunday evening. Will Lee, a cornerback who was basically one of the best defensive players at Kansas State last year, he ended up committing to Texas A&M. Remember, Kansas State, their new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein. I almost said Colin Quinn. Colin Klein comes from Kansas State. He brings with him, now I don't necessarily think one has to do with the other, but one of their best defensive players now goes to A&M. And I think it's important because A&M has lost about 7 or 8 marquee players since Mike Elko took over. Deuce Harmon hit the portal, although he says that he may come back a defensive back. Tyreek Chappelle hit the portal. He is a defensive back as well. Walter Nolan, we just mentioned. Fadil Diggs, we just mentioned. There was another 5-star that made some waves this weekend, LT Overton. Okay, so he was a 5-star in the class of 2023, decided to reclassify, played the last 2 years at A&M. 2 schools appear to be in the lead for LT Overton. The first one, Alabama, got a visit from him on Friday. He got a visit from them on Friday. We'll see if he ends up seriously considering them. But then on top of that, he also visited South Carolina this weekend. So South Carolina is hemorrhaging players left and right. If they could somehow get a commitment from this kid, that would be huge. Really talented defensive lineman. Those are the kinds of guys that you need to win in the SEC. We'll see if it'll happen with LT Overton. A couple other notes from the portal. One, I just did a pretty big segment on this on YouTube, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But for anybody who wants to criticize Colorado and Coach Prime, and it's your prerogative. They went 4-8. Coach Prime had a busy weekend in the portal, okay? And so a couple of things is one is that obviously last week they get the 5-star offensive tackle out of high school in Jordan Seaton. But they needed help along the offensive line. And how about this? On Saturday, they picked up 5 commitments total, 4 on the offensive line. The most notable ones, Tyler Johnson, a 2-year starter from Houston, Khalil Benson, who started every game in Indiana this year. And so I know there's going to be a lot of pushback. Torres, you talk too much about Coach Prime, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I talk about what you guys want to talk about. You guys love him. You guys hate him. People care about Coach Prime. But the one thing I'll give Coach Prime credit for, Deion Sanders, is it was clear that he was not happy with the O-line. And you can debate, did he go too hard? Should he have called them out as a unit after that UCLA game? But it's clear he prioritized it, and it is clear that he is upgrading that position group. Again, 4 quality offensive linemen out of the portal on Saturday. A 5-star out of the out of the high school ranks. By the way, this isn't portal stuff, but they also got a commitment from a top 100 wide receiver out of Texas named Draylon Miller this weekend out of high school. So in the last week, 2 top 100 recruits, 5 portal players, and he's doing what he does. Now, obviously, it's got to translate onto the field, but I will tell you what I keep saying about Coach Prime. I don't think Colorado is as far off as people think. I know they went 4-8. I know they started 3-0, which means they went 1-8 down the stretch, okay? But at the same time, of their 8 losses, 5 were by a touchdown or less. That included, by the way, a walk-off loss to Arizona, which ended up winning 9 games. They were in that game till the end. They ended up losing by 6 to Utah. Utah finished 8-4. Utah was on a 3rd-string quarterback, but Colorado was on a backup quarterback in that game. USC, they had the ball driving late in the game with a chance to tie the game up. They lose by 7. So 7-point loss to USC. Close loss to Oregon State. Utah, which finished 8-4, they lose by 6. And then Arizona, which finished 9-3, they lose by 3. This team isn't that far off. Now it's on Coach Prime. Got to get better. Got to, trim the margins. But he is upgrading the talent, as he said he would, 4 offensive lines, caliber starters. And by the way, he's not done. That's the other thing, too, is he gets a couple commitments. People say, well, you need more than that. Yeah, you think Coach Prime is done? No, but these were the guys that were available right now. And these are the guys that he's going to go get. And finally, what I will say about Coach Prime, and I've said it a lot, you can like him, you can hate him, whatever. But if you think that he is done recruiting, think again. You get guys in front of him. This guy is a game changer. This guy could get, if you put a kid in front of him, if you put a kid with his parents in front of him, Coach Prime's got a shot. Picked up 2 top 100 recruits in the last couple of days, 5 players out of the portal. Can't wait to see what he does next. A couple other notes from the weekend. 1, Louisville. How about Louisville picking up 2 marquee players out of the portal from the Ivy League? Okay. Offensive lineman Jonathan Mendoza. He came from Yale. He was a kid with offers from Pitt, Kentucky, etc. A lot of Power 5 offers. And then, this is a great name, defensive lineman Thor Griffith from Harvard. Another guy entered the portal, was very coveted by Power 5 schools. He ends up committing to Louisville. Kentucky, cross-state rival, Raymond Cottrell, 6'3" receiver from Texas A&M, really talented recruit, barely played this year, decided to redshirt. He ends up at Kentucky. Kentucky, of course, already has the commitment from Brock Vandegrift, so busy weekend there as well. I'm sure I missed some portal stuff.